Six guns and sorcery collide in the original fantasy land of Myria. The Oathbook is a relic of great and ancient power held within the Spire of Argenport. Kept within its hallowed pages are all of the events in the Eternal card game. A story I will be sharing with you through the lore in the campaigns, behind the cards, and inside every bit of information I can find. This is a journey into the Oathbook. Welcome to the first episode of the Oathbook, a story-driven journey through the lands of Myria and beyond. My name is Matt, but you may know me as the Manted Man, and I will be taking you with each chapter of the Oathbook through the ever-evolving story of Eternal, a cross-platform collectible card game developed by Direwolf Digital. I do this in my spare time, and I have no direct affiliation at this time with Direwolf or the Eternal team. I am passionate about the lore and the stories and all of the entertainment I take in, but something about Eternal really stuck with me and beckoned me to dive deeper. Through the community and the Unexpected Results podcast, I found out that others were also vested in the story that was being woven. I decided to start this series as a place to catalog everything I could find and share it with the community. If you enjoy this series and want to see it grow and get better, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications, commenting below, reaching out to me on Twitter, Reddit, or Discord, or donating directly. I will always be looking for people or ways to make the Oathbook better, so please do not hesitate to make requests for content, correct me if I have something wrong, or reach out if you want to help contribute. Let's set some ground rules so things don't get too crazy. If I overlook or do not mention something, it will likely be addressed in a future, more detailed video that is more relevant to that subject, but please don't be afraid to ask about it. Because the game is still in early access as of recording this video, some story points have been changed in the intro campaign and through updates from Direwolf. An example is the removal of Geralt Iceheart from Talir's section of the Empty Throne tutorial campaign. If I don't mention something that you think happened, go back and check and see if it was removed or changed. With this and future story episode, timelines are a bit muddy, and we don't get very many hard timelines for events. As such, my referencing to these events will sometimes be vague as well. In future videos, and as we have more information, I will be able to sharpen up those timelines for you. If you care about story spoilers, turn back now. This video will be rife with them. I will be going through every major event that takes place in all of the currently released campaigns. The Empty Throne, The End and the Beginning, Jekk's Bounty, The Tale of Horus Traver, Dead Reckoning, and Into Shadow, as well as covering the story portions of promo cards, the now defunct season updates, event story updates, and the new monthly chapter updates. First, an overview of the setting of Eternal. The story starts off centered around the capital city of Argenport in the lands of Myria, but we will journey beyond there to the Outlands, through the Skycrag Mountains, deep into the Felnwood, across the blazing deserts of Amaran, into the Twisted Shadowlands, and further to the strange lands that lay beyond. The story starts off from the perspective of 5 scions and a handful of heroes in Myria, all centered around a mysterious and powerful artifact known as the Eternal Throne. There are many characters in the story, and many more to come, but let's start off with what we know. Buckle up. The story of Eternal does not have a defined beginning, but the galvanizing event that starts what we do know is the activation of the Eternal Throne by Caiphus when the Strangers attack Argenport. There is a lot of history and mystique around the Strangers, as well as their creation and unification around Horus Traver, but we will cover all of that in a future video. All you need to know for now is that they were guided and manipulated by Azendel in the events of the Tale of Horus Traver to attack Argenport and King Caiphus. At the climax of this attack, the Umbran advisor to Caiphus, later revealed to be Azendel as well, convinces him to activate the incredible power of the Eternal Throne. When the dust settles, Caiphus is gone and presumed by most to be dead. The Strangers are scattered to the winds, and Argenport is left in a state of panic. Before these events, the rebellion is just budding, but after Caiphus' disappearance, support for their cause explodes, fueled by the fervor of their leader, General Izalio. At this point, the story splits into 7 major parts that all happen in parallel to one another in an asynchronous fashion. Many of these stories cross paths with one another, so there will be some repetition. Just bear with me as we break down the main storyline from the following perspectives: Rolant, Jekk with the special guest star Icaria, Vara, Kaleb, Eilyn, Caiphus, and we'll close with Talir. Before we really get into the individual stories, I want to take a second to tell you about our premier sponsor, Inked Gaming. Their tagline is "Your game, your style," and there really is not a better way to describe what they do. If you're a tabletop gamer or a PC gamer, they have everything to let you show off your own brand. Create customized playmats, playmat bags, mouse pads, and more. Or shop for items inspired by your favorite traditional and video game scenes, characters, and yes, even memes. They have hundreds of pre-generated designs and the ability to quickly create custom designs to fit you perfectly. Use code TRS12 for 12% off your final amount at checkout. Do it your way, do it with Inked Gaming. Your game, your style. Rolant is not the first character that we are introduced to. That honor is given to Jekk the Bounty Hunter. But he is the most logical place to start this story, because he sets off the bomb that acts as another defining moment. At the beginning of the story, and to this day, Rolant is presumed to be the oldest member of the royal family that we have been introduced to. He is the uncle of Caiphus and Talir, and Lord Commander of the Crown Watch of Argenport. After Caiphus' disappearance and the exodus of the other scions from Argenport, Rolant names himself as the acting regent and defender of Argenport. Rolant's first action as regent is a very faithful one to the throne. He knows Vara is still alive, and he sends out a bunch of people to find her. This includes Jekk and Icaria, which we will cover later in the video, as well as others like Marshal Ironthorn. During the Stranger's attack on Argenport and the subsequent activation of the Eternal Throne, the Crown Watch sustained heavy losses, so Rolant set out on his next phase of leadership, filling the ranks. This is where he starts to make some questionable decisions. First, he conscripts the Cabal, a shadowy group of outlaws and rogues that inhabit the underbelly of Argenport. Unsatisfied with the strength of his force, he essentially enacts a draft and leaves Argenport to go to the Cambrai University, where he conscripts all of the able-bodied students. There is an air to how this happens that is reminiscent of the adage, "The beatings will continue until morale improves." Soon after his triumphant march back to Argenport with his new military force, the rebels decide to attack the city. This event would come to be called the First Battle of Argenport, but it would also be marked by another great event as well. Rolant defeats General Izalio, but soon realizes that his new and untrained forces are being overrun by the rebel fighters. Rolant's next move is one that is infamous. He activates what is effectively a tactical nuclear strike on the bulk of the rebel forces inside the walls of his own city. This event is called Harsh Rule, and it decimates not only the rebel forces, but also kills thousands of Argenport militants and innocent bystanders. Rolant then acts quickly to seed propaganda that the rebels were responsible for the devastation caused by Harsh Rule, and that he was actually the savior that stopped the cataclysm from being worse. Soon after, he is confronted by Icaria, who quickly leaves the city and her post as commander of the Valkyrie, and Rolant puts Mokto in charge. This new force calls themselves the Inquisition, and they are tasked with hunting down Icaria and the remaining rebels. Rolant orders the bounty hunter Jekk to be executed as a final line to cover up the truth about Harsh Rule. Sometime later, the Cabal, under Chairman Dizo, strengthens their hold over the people of Argenport and its resources, and they overthrow and imprison Rolant. Almost immediately after this, Eilyn begins her siege of Argenport, giving the not-executed Jekk the cover he needs to sneak back in and kill Rolant. His final words reflect that he regrets nothing, and that he did it all for the good of Argenport, before accepting his fate of death at the hands of the scorned bounty hunter. While Jekk and Icaria have their own unique stories and growth internally, their stories are almost entirely told while they are adventuring together. Jekk's story starts out well before the disappearance of Caiphus. He fights Curiox at least 3 times, but he is ultimately turned in for a very large bounty at the end of Jekk's bounty for a crime that we don't get any information about. Icaria, while probably more popular than Jekk, does not have as much backstory. She is the commander of Rolant's Valkyrie and loyal to the cause at the heart of Argenport. After the disappearance of Caiphus, Jekk is paired up with Icaria and given a chance to pay his debts to the crown by finding and returning Vara to Argenport. Because Jekk is probably the best bounty hunter in Myria, the pair quickly pick up the scent of Vara and follow her into the Shadowlands. They do eventually find her being guided by Azendel, and, after a brief run-in against her, they free her from his grasp, but not before he escapes back into the shadow. Things don't really go as planned, which we will get into in Vara's story, and Icaria ends up bringing Jekk back to Argenport without Vara, just in time to see the beginnings of the rebel attack on the city. After Harsh Rule is enacted, Jekk is sentenced to hang under the guise of his crimes and sent off into the wastes with an entourage to complete the execution. Icaria, having confronted Rolant about harsh rule and not liking the result, defects and flies after Jekk to try and save him, for one reason alone. Jekk knows the truth about everything that has happened. Icaria saves Jekk and they live happily ever after. Oh wait, no. Jekk and Icaria decide to seek out what is left of the Shattered Rebellion. So, they head to the Cambria University, because Rolant is not a popular name there after his draft. They are then directed towards a rebel medical camp, and finally to a cave system in the Outlands. Icaria and Jekk spend months among the rebels, training with them and learning about the full scope of their cause. They are continually on the run from Mokto and the Inquisition during this time. The two of them end up leaving the rebels so Mokto will not find them, and once they get the Inquisition far enough off of the trail of the rebels, they turn the tables and hunt the hunters. They track Mokto to the Direwood, where Mokto ends up killing Icaria and fleeing back to Argenport. Jekk mourns for a while, and then he goes to Argenport as well to get a little vengeance. He sneaks into the dungeons during Eilyn's first siege, and he kills Rolant in cold blood. He then gives a bunch of intel to Eilyn and disappears over the horizon. Vara helped me learn a new word, impetuous. She is the entitled, true-born daughter of Caiphus and Eilyn. The moment her father disappears, she does what any rebellious princess of a super-powerful barbarian widow queen should do. She bolts from the city to follow her dreams. During her travels, she feels drawn to the Shadowlands. She thinks this is fate calling her, but we find out later that it was not. She meets up with Azendel in his human form, whom she does not recognize as the Umbran Advisor. I'm assuming he was just known as the Advisor, and never actually gave a name during his service in Argenport. In the Shadowlands, Azendel guides her deeper, and she fights monsters and rogue groups, all while falling under the corrupting influence of Azendel and the Shadowlands. Soon after, she meets her first would-be captor, Marshal Ironthorn, whom she quickly dispatches and sends home. It is at this point that her manipulation is complete, and she tells Azendel that she wants to avoid all future captors and just disappear entirely. Azendel offers her a pendant that wipes her memories, and they romp deeper into the Shadowlands together. After a while, Jekk and Icaria come upon Azendel and Mindslave Vara, and a fight breaks out between them. During the fight, Azendel realizes that Vara is outmatched and he ducks out before anyone notices. Icaria cuts the amulet off of her neck and she starts getting her memories back. Vara travels with Jekk and Icaria while she gets her strength and memories back, and they leave the Shadowlands. This is when Vara realizes that they're taking her back to Argenport, and she pitches a fit. She ends up beating Icaria and telling them to go home and tell everyone that she is never coming back. Vara returns to the Shadowlands to find Azendel and pay him back for his gifts. As Vara journeys into the Shadowlands, she hears echoes and whispers calling to her, drawing her deeper. She assumes that this is Azendel and follows them without question. She eventually happens across a twisted structure, and she goes inside to find the source of her calling, expecting to find and beat Azendel. She is quite surprised to find her father, Caiphus, inside, alive and well. They both discuss Azendel's betrayal, and they team up to find him and end his tormenting. They eventually do, and they defeat him together even though he is in his final form. Caiphus stops Vara from killing Azendel, allowing him to escape yet again. After all this, Vara has a realization. She needs to return to Argenport and rule like was originally intended. So she turns down the prospect of going to the Strange Lands with Caiphus. She emerges from the Shadowlands to close her story at the formation of the Triumvirate. Kaleb, the uncrowned prince, the bastard with a belly full of fire, is Caiphus' illegitimate son. Or is he? Before all of this, he is pretty popular with many influential people in Argenport, but he knows he can never be king once Vara is born. After Caiphus' disappearance, he decides that he does want to be king after all, and he sets out to prove his lineage by finding out about his mother so that he can claim the throne for himself. First, he goes to the Praxis Arcanum. They are a group of mages that he thinks can use magic to find out about his past and provide enough proof for him to become king. Kaleb has a run-in with one of the highest-ranking mages of the Praxis, Marison the Eldest. She refuses to give Kaleb a straight answer and gives him a twisted riddle that we hear repeated throughout his storyline. The acorn seeks a second tree, when it could thrive as one. Unwilling to let secrets be, you are your father's son. Obviously not satisfied with this answer, Kaleb goes home, grabs his father's journals, and heads out to follow in his footsteps. He ends up in the icy north at a place called the Calderan Cradle. There, beneath the waters of a steaming glacial lake, he finds the sunken tower. Inside, he learns that he is not his father's son, but rather a clone, and there are others as well. Kaleb has to fight a twisted version of himself before he escapes the tower and returns to the surface, reborn. With a new drive, he returns to Argenport to claim his throne, only to find that the Second Battle of Argenport has already happened, and Eilyn, his stepmother, is the queen and Rolant is dead. After learning about everything that has happened, Kaleb challenges Eilyn to a trial by combat to determine the rightful ruler, and she accepts. During their fight in the throne room, Talir time travels in and stops the fight, telling them that there are bigger problems that they have to deal with together. They agree to stay their royal family feud, and they meet up with her again at the Praxis Arcanum. Once they arrive, a message bursts from one of the Praxis scrying pools. This draws them to the edge of the Shadowlands where they find Vara and form the Triumvirate. Eilyn is where things start to get a touch more complex, because she has no direct relation to Caiphus. So we need to start with a little bit of her backstory. We will go further in a later video, but what you need to know is this. Eilyn was the clan mother of the Skycrag clans, essentially the Barbarian Queen. She attacked Argenport for reasons that are still unclear. The fight was so devastating for both sides that when Eilyn confronted Caiphus, instead of killing one another, they decide that it's better for their respective kingdoms if they form a truce. This results in Caiphus and Eilyn getting married and having a baby named Vara, which they agree is the true born heir to the Eternal Throne. Fast forward to Caiphus disappearing, and Eilyn, who has never been seen in a good light, decides that it's probably safer for her if she returns to Skycrag. Well, it turns out she was wrong. She does not even get onto clan lands before she is turned away and called a traitor to her own people. She decides that she should probably go back to Argenport and see if she can help there, but on the way back, Ashara tries to assassinate her. Luckily, she survives, Ashara disappears back into obscurity, and Eilyn gets back into the city in time for the First Battle of Argenport. After harsh rule, she gathers up refugees, which include surviving rebels, Crown Watch, and Argenport citizens, and she takes them on a caravan to the Horu Enclave, which is neutral territory. Once everyone is safe there, she goes back to Skycrag with the intention of finding out why she was turned away. She fights her way in and finds her brother, Vadius, has become clan father, and he feels like he and his people were abandoned by her. Eilyn makes an example out of Vadius and regains her place as leader of the clans. Upon the reunification, she marches an army towards Argenport to stop Rolant. Because she does not want people to die, she mounts a siege to weaken the military forces of the city and coax Rolant into coming out and talking rather than fighting. Instead of Rolant coming out, Jekk emerges instead and tells Eilyn that Rolant is dead and the Cabal have taken over and are smuggling in supplies, so a siege won't work long term. Eilyn mounts her first assault on the gates but is not able to get through. She pulls back and redoubles her siege efforts. After some time, she pushes a second attack and gets into Argenport. She scatters the Cabal and retakes the throne, naming herself Queen Regent. She stops the fighting as quickly as she can, and she brings all the Skycrag loyalists into Argenport, and she opens the gates to begin trade and rebuilding. Kaleb arrives thereafter, challenges Eilyn for birthright, and for the throne, which leads to the events of Chapter 23, and ultimately the formation of the Triumvirate. These last two stories are probably the most complex. We're going to start with Caiphus because he has only recently been revealed to be alive. Prior to his disappearance, he was king of Argenport and master of the Eternal Throne. We don't have a lot of information on if he was a good king, other than he ordered the gates of Argenport sealed during the time of the sickness called the Scourge, as well as his quelling of the Skycrag clans and his marriage to Eilyn. At some point, he journeyed to the Calderan Cradle, used the Sunken Tower laboratory to create a clone, and returned with a mystery baby that he called his son, Kaleb. After he activates the Eternal Throne, we don't hear from him directly in any way or form that we recognize him. Yes, the whispers from the different artifacts in the Shadowlands are him, but we never are told that until he is revealed to be alive. So when he activates the throne, he is transported to a strange land beyond the Shadowlands. He recognizes nothing outright, but everything feels very familiar to him. He journeys into the Shadowlands to try and find his way back home and fix the mess caused by his actions. He is tormented in the Shadowlands by Azendel, and he learns that Azendel manufactured all of the problems and tricked him into activating the throne for some unknown reason. He reaches out to Kaleb, Eilyn, and Talir to let them know that he is alive, but he is never able to get through to any of them. He tries a different approach, to put a message into the shadows to reach out to Vara directly, and it catches her attention, drawing her deep into the Shadowlands. Once he is reunited with Vara, they beat and ultimately spare Azendel. Once they recover from the fight, Caiphus tells Vara about the Strange Lands, and he offers to take her with him. She declines, and Caiphus goes off on his own to learn what he can. Talir is arguably one of the strongest and most complex characters in the Eternal story. Her storyline involves time travel and does not make a lot of sense if it is followed through the chronological canon of the story, so we will follow her through her own eyes, which is hard enough. She is Caiphus' older sister, and she removed herself from the political game early on, deciding instead to work with magic and the Praxis Arcanum. After Caiphus' disappearance, she leaves Argenport in search of answers. She's the only character that does not just resolve that he is dead from the onset. She goes first to the Felnwood, where she finds a rogue stranger. This catches her off guard because she thought that they were all defeated when their leader was. She meets a second stranger in the Rakano camps and a third stranger in the Huru Enclave. It's in the Huru Enclave that she gets her first clue that changes her focus. The Huru envoy is corrupted and he says two things. They are faces and shadows, death. And the shadows, they are coming. Talir quickly heads back to Argenport and witnesses harsh rule, which devastates her. In her desperation, she goes back in time to try and stop what she thinks is the catalyst for everything, the mounting of the Stranger army. The point in time that she is able to reach has the Strangers already too powerful for her to defeat, and they cannot be reasoned with, so she returns to the present. At this point in her desperation is mounting so much that she abdicates the position of Archmagister and turns her focus to working with the Waystones. We lose track of her as she bounces through time and space, but she returns during the duel for the throne between Kaleb and Eilyn. She stops them from fighting and gets everyone to the Praxis Arcanum, where a message echoes through the scrying pools from the Shadowlands. Talir instantly recognizes the voice as Caiphus, but no one else does, and she doesn't tell them, presumably because she doesn't know if Caiphus is corrupted or not. She and Kaleb and Eilyn all go to the edge of the Shadowlands and they find Vara. The Triumvirate is actually her idea. She says that Kaleb, Eilyn, and Vara all have qualities that a ruler needs to have, and that they should work together under her guidance for the coming conflicts. This is where the story comes back together. Not only is it a reunion for Vara, Kaleb, Eilyn, and Talir, but it is a reunion of the original storylines back into one. 4 of the 5 original Scions are headed back to Argenport together, Icaria and Rolant are dead, and Jekk is off doing lone gun things. The Strangers and the Rebellion are both broken and scattered, and the regions of Winchest, Genev, Ixton, Aurelia, and Carandon have opened up trade lines with Argenport. So this is where we stand, and all of the main facts that we know. We still have a lot of questions and a bunch of side stories that can be developed, but we have answers to a lot of the first act's questions. As the series grows and matures, we will discuss characters by themselves in a lot more detail. I hope you enjoyed this primer. Maybe you learned something that you didn't realize before. Again, if you do like what I am doing, please subscribe and comment. Consider donating or supporting in other ways by sharing with your friends or whatever you think is appropriate. If you want to reach out to me directly, I will include my Twitter, Discord, and email down below. I want to know what you all want to hear about next, and I want your feedback on what we have already covered. Until next time, this has been episode 1 of The Oathbook.
End of the road, friend.